It all unfolded on a Tuesday, just an ordinary day with nothing to mark it as special. No anniversary, no birthday, nothing out of the ordinary. I remember it clearly because I had stopped at the store on my way home to pick up her favorite brand of tea, the one she always claimed was too pricey even though I knew she secretly enjoyed it. As I stepped into the house, I expected the usual routine, a distracted hello, maybe a faint smile before she turned back to whatever had her attention. But what I got was completely unexpected. She sat on the couch, legs crossed, eyes fixed on her phone screen. Without even glancing up, she spoke words that felt like a slap. "You're not entitled to my affection." No lead-up, no sign something was coming. Just those icy words dropped like a cold fact. I stood there, holding the grocery bag, stunned. At first, I couldn't even register what she'd said. Her tone was so detached, so unfeeling, like she was just making a casual observation. It felt as if I had been foolish to believe anything else. Trying to shake off the disbelief, I laughed nervously. "What?" I asked, hoping I had misunderstood, that maybe it was some kind of offbeat joke. She let out a sigh, finally placing her phone aside and meeting my eyes with a look that hovered between tiredness and mild annoyance. "What I mean is," she said, "you act like being married means I owe you attention, time, love, but I don't. You're not entitled to any of it." Her words struck hard. This was my wife, the woman I'd built my life around, the one I'd stood by through every season, every hardship and triumph. And she was looking at me like I was a stranger who had asked too much of her. As if my loyalty and devotion meant nothing at all. I should have felt anger. I should have defended myself, reminded her of everything I'd done for us, for her. But none of that came. Instead, something in me just stopped. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't try to reach her. I simply shut down, realizing something I had been avoiding for too long. I had been holding on to someone who had already let go. That moment changed everything. I went through the motions, dropped my keys on the table, set the tea on the counter, walked upstairs to change. But inside, a shift had taken place. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Emotionless. Uninvested. Like I had become another fixture in the house, something always there but easily ignored. That night, lying beside her in bed, I stared at the ceiling, the weight of her words pressing heavily on my chest. "You're not entitled to my affection." What did that even mean? Had she been feeling this way for a long time? Had I missed the signs because I was too hopeful, too in love? At some point, I drifted into a restless sleep only to be awakened by soft laughter. It was light, flirtatious, and not meant for me. I turned and saw her face illuminated by her phone screen. She was texting, a smile playing at her lips. I didn't say a word. I simply turned over and faced the other way. And that became the new normal. Over the next several days, I stopped putting in effort. I no longer texted her during the day to check in. I didn't ask about her morning or whether she needed anything picked up. I stopped sitting beside her during shows and didn't reach for a goodnight kiss. And she didn't react. If anything, she seemed more at ease, as if the tension had finally eased off her shoulders. That's when I understood this wasn't just a difficult period. It wasn't a misunderstanding or stress. She had emotionally checked out a long time ago. Maybe she was even investing in someone else. I began noticing things I had ignored before, the late-night texting, the renewed interest in her appearance, the way she hummed contentedly after being on her phone for hours. She was cheerful, lighter, but it wasn't because of me. One evening I sat at the kitchen table and watched her from across the room. She was scrolling again, her expression brightening at whatever she saw. I cleared my throat. "Are you working late tonight?" She barely lifted her eyes. "No. I've got plans." Plans. That was it. No detail, no invitation to ask questions. Just the word. And that was all I needed. I nodded, pushing my chair back. "All right." That single word made her pause. She looked at me then, noticing something different, maybe in my tone or in the way I didn't try to pry. I offered a faint smile and added, "Yeah. Have fun." It seemed to hit her at that moment, the calm in my voice, the absence of desperation. For the first time in years, I wasn't pleading for her love. I wasn't trying to win her back. I was letting go. Later that night, after she left for whatever her plans were, I sat in the living room, staring at my phone. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before I tapped on a contact I hadn't spoken to in ages. The call rang twice before a familiar voice picked up. "Hey, man. Been a while." I exhaled deeply, realizing just how long I'd been holding everything in. "Yeah. I think it's time for something new." And with that simple conversation, everything began to shift. The silence that once defined me started to fade. I had always valued open conversations, believed in resolving conflicts, and standing up for what truly mattered. But when someone makes it clear through their actions that they no longer care, words start to lose their power. My wife never had to spell it out, her decision had already been made long ago. Her distant behavior, the late nights she never explained, and her growing apathy all pointed to the same truth: she had emotionally checked out well before I ever considered leaving. She still lived under the same roof, but in reality she had been gone for a long time. Not that she would be staying much longer. That evening, while she was out tending to her mysterious plans, I found myself sitting in the living room, holding my phone, staring at a name I hadn't contacted in more than 12 months. Owen. A longtime friend, someone I had lost touch with after marriage, consumed all my attention, and I busied myself trying to hold everything together. He had always warned me that I was investing too much in a woman who gave back so little. But I didn't want to hear it back then. I was convinced I hadn't made a wrong turn. Yet now, in a home that felt more like a shell, I understood that he had been right all along. When he answered, there was a slight pause in his voice before he joked, "Man, I was starting to think you vanished off the planet." I gave a weak laugh, dragging my hand down my face. "Feels like it," I muttered. After a brief silence, he cut straight to it. "This is about her, right?" I didn't even need to say her name. Everyone who knew me already knew. I had spent years covering for her coldness, pretending things weren't as bad as they were. But Owen had always seen through the act. "She's gone, in every way that counts," I finally admitted. "And I'm done chasing after someone who doesn't want to be caught." "It's about time," he replied with quiet conviction. "So, what's the plan?" That was the part one hadn't quite figured out. For so long I had played the role of the man holding it all together, the one who refused to let go. I never allowed myself to think about what would happen if I actually walked away. But I wasn't about to sit still while she decided how her story ended. "I need to leave," I said, not so much to him as to myself. "I have to stop throwing my time and energy into someone who's already moved on." He let out a breath. "Then do it. Pack up. Come stay here for a bit. Clear your head." I had never imagined I'd be the one to go first. In all my thoughts, it was always her making a dramatic exit, chasing something or someone she believed would fulfill her. But maybe that's what she was waiting for all along. For me to stay rooted while she quietly slipped away. It was time to flip that narrative. That night, while she was still out, I began gathering my things. Folding clothes, tucking away shoes, it felt surreal, like I was a guest packing up after a short stay, not someone leaving his own home. Yet with each item I packed, the pressure on my chest began to ease. This wasn't an escape. It was me finally choosing myself. When she returned hours later, she didn't even glance at the half-empty closet. She didn't question why my keys weren't hanging by the door or why my shoes were gone. She just got into bed, let out a tired sigh like it had been a long day, and turned off the light without saying a word. She didn't notice I was already halfway out the door. But soon she would. Because for the first time I wasn't sitting around hoping she'd decide I was worth the effort. I had made that decision on my own. I left just before sunrise. Not because I feared a confrontation, I had simply run out of reasons to care. There was nothing left worth fighting for. The version of my wife I had once admired, the person I had fallen in love with, didn't exist anymore. I wasn't abandoning her. In truth, she had already walked away from me a long time ago. The house was still and silent as I carried my bags out to the car. I paused for a moment, taking in the space that had held years of love, sacrifices, and silent heartbreak. With a final glance, I closed the door behind me, shutting away everything I had tried so hard to keep alive. I didn't feel bitter. Not even angry. I was simply done. Owen greeted me at his apartment with a knowing expression. "You look like a guy who just woke up after being asleep for years," he said. Letting out a deep exhale, I nodded. "That's exactly what it feels like." He gave my shoulder a pat and stepped aside to let me in. It wasn't anything fancy, just a modest two-bedroom place with a worn-out couch. But for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. I sat down, hands over my face, letting the weight of everything settle. "So, what's next?" Owen asked, offering me a cold beer. I took a long sip, letting the chill sting my throat before I replied. "Yeah?" I let her figure it out. And she did sooner than I expected. Around noon, her first message came through. Just a short, "Where are you?" I didn't reply. Another one followed, "Did you take your stuff?" Still, I said nothing. As the evening rolled in, the messages turned into calls. I watched the phone light up over and over again on the coffee table, her name flashing like an alert I had no intention of answering. Owen glanced over with a smirk. "She didn't even blink when you left, and now she's acting like you vanished without a trace." Leaning back into the couch, I returned the smile. She probably thought I'd never leave. Always assumed I'd be right there, waiting. And this time, I just let the phone ring. By the time night arrived, she finally sent a message that actually carried some weight. "Are you okay?" That one nearly made me chuckle. Was I okay? Yeah? After spending years being treated like a footnote in her life, after finally understanding that she had emotionally checked out long before I did, I was more than okay. I placed my phone aside and went to sleep without replying. But the true jolt came the following morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Owen came in holding my phone. Dude, you'll probably want to read this. I took the phone from him and saw the message that made me pause for the first time. I think we should talk. Suddenly, she wasn't pretending not to care. She wasn't avoiding me or treating me like I was a burden. For the first time, it hit her that I was really gone. And I could tell that wasn't part of her plan. I left the message unread for hours. Not to be cruel, but because I didn't feel any rush to respond. She might have expected urgency, but I no longer felt it. For so long, I'd been the one trying, the one chasing, the one attempting to fix fractures I hadn't caused. Now, I was allowing things to unfold as they would. That heavy burden I once carried? It no longer belonged to me. But I wasn't naive. This wasn't a sudden epiphany for her. It wasn't sorrow. If our marriage had meant something real to her, she wouldn't have needed me to disappear just to realize I existed. No, this was something else, something rooted deeper. And if I knew her the way I believed I did, her message wasn't about love. It was about losing control. I carried on like nothing had changed. Had breakfast with Owen, we hit the gym, grabbed lunch, and wandered around the city just to clear my thoughts. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing, constant texts, repeated calls. When we returned to the apartment, Owen leaned against the counter, a grin on his face as he scrolled through his phone. You ready to deal with it? He asked. I sat down and finally unlocked my phone. The unread messages had piled up. We need to talk. Why aren't you answering? I don't get what you're doing. Please, just tell me where you are. I took a breath and sent her the first words she'd received from me in 2 days. What do you want? She replied quickly. I want to talk. About us. That was new. Us hadn't been a topic for a long time. I had clung to the idea of us while she slowly drifted further away. And now suddenly it mattered to her? I stared at the message, unsure of my next step. Then, without overthinking, I hit the call button. She answered immediately. Where are you? Her voice carried no greeting, no warmth, just straight urgency. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice steady. Why does that matter to you? A brief pause. Because you just left. I laughed quietly and shook my head. No. I've been leaving for a while. You just didn't notice. Silence followed. I could imagine her on the other end, clutching the phone, struggling to find the right words. That's not fair, she finally said. Fair? I repeated, raising a brow. You think fair means giving you my time, my care, my commitment while you treat me like I'm your backup? Fair is me standing still, waiting, while you figure out if I'm worth your time. She exhaled sharply. You're making this more than it is. I waited, letting the silence stretch between us. Then came the real reason behind her sudden interest. I don't understand why you're doing this now. Not why I walked away. Not what caused the fracture. Just, why now? Because she thought I'd never leave. Because she believed I'd stay close, waiting for a love that was never truly returned. Because she assumed I'd keep settling for scraps as long as I was near enough to imagine more. I rubbed a hand through my hair and exhaled slowly. You still don't get it, do you? What don't I get? I'm not doing anything, I said. I just stopped waiting for you to love me. Silence again. I could almost hear her breathing change, the way her thoughts scrambled to make sense of what I had just said. But she had nothing left to offer. After a long pause, she muttered, so that's it. I thought about all the love I had poured into her, the time and sacrifices I had made, and how easily she had dismissed it all until now. And in that moment it hit me. What I was hearing in her voice wasn't sorrow. It wasn't regret. It was fear. Fear that the comfort she had taken for granted was slipping away. Fear that she had finally gone too far. Fear that, for the first time, she wasn't calling the shots. And right then, I knew for sure she never thought I'd really leave. But she definitely wasn't ready for what would come next. I ended the call in silence. There was nothing more to explain, no point in dragging myself back into a pattern that had only ever left me empty. If she wanted clarity, she'd have to find it without me breaking it down for her. Owen, watching from the couch, narrowed his eyes as I tossed the phone onto the table. She finally getting it? He asked. I ran a hand through my hair, sighing. It's not regret. It's not even about losing me. It's just fear. He nodded knowingly. Because she never believed you'd really walk away. And that was the truth. She had never imagined that I might be the one to walk away. In her world, she held the reins, always believing she dictated how much I could have, how much I mattered. For years, she clutched the upper hand in our relationship, confident I would always be the one trying to hold everything together. But what happens when the one you've taken for granted decides not to play by your rules anymore? The following morning, the phone started buzzing again. I didn't answer. Instead, I went for a run, took a long shower, and made myself breakfast, all while my phone lit up repeatedly, flashing like a warning light. She wasn't accustomed to being ignored. Normally, I picked up immediately, clinging to every scrap of attention she might throw my way. But not this time. Now, she was the one left waiting. By the time midday rolled around, her approach shifted. The tone of her messages softened. She wrote, "I think we need to talk face to face. This isn't what I wanted. I just need to see you." It was clear she had changed tactics, moving from distant indifference to a more thoughtful and intentional concern. But I wasn't falling for it, not yet. Owen leaned against the kitchen counter, glancing over at my phone just as another message popped up. "You thinking of replying?" he asked. I gave a slight smirk and shook my head. "She can wait," I said. That's what she had made me do, time and time again, left me hanging, uncertain, holding out hope for something real. For years, she had teased the idea of love without ever offering it fully. Now it was her turn to feel what that absence meant. By the evening, she finally broke. A message came through that stood apart from all the rest. "I'm home. Please come. I need to talk." I stared at the screen, weighing the decision. There was a time when those words would have made me drop everything and rush over. But that time had passed. Still, I knew I had to go, not for her, but for me. I grabbed my keys and stepped out the door, feeling a shift deep inside. This wasn't the same man she had kept waiting in the shadows for years. I was different now. I knew my value. When I got there, something felt off. The house was too still, too silent. She was seated on the couch, her phone lying quietly on the table beside her. It looked like she'd been sitting there, waiting for a while. Her eyes met mine the moment I stepped in. "You really left," she said softly. I closed the door behind me. "And you really didn't notice." She let out a shaky breath and gripped the edge of the couch like it was anchoring her. "I don't understand why you're doing this." A dry chuckle escaped me. "You once told me I wasn't entitled to your affection. I took your word for it." Her mouth opened like she wanted to respond, but no sound came. She wasn't used to feeling powerless. She had spent so long keeping me at a distance, never expecting I'd eventually stop reaching for her. She wet her lips and scanned my face. "I just thought we had more time." And that was the truth. She had clung to the belief that I would always be there, waiting in the wings, no matter how far she pulled away. She had grown so used to being in charge that it never occurred to her that I might one day stop chasing a future that never seemed to come. I looked at her, searching for something authentic, something beyond the fear of being left alone. But all I saw was someone afraid of solitude, not someone who had rediscovered what we once had. Taking a deep breath, I felt something heavy lift inside me. "You had all the time in the world. You just never used it." Her expression wavered, and for the first time, regret flickered across her face. But it was too late. I didn't belong to her anymore. I stood there, just inside the door, giving the silence space to breathe. She looked smaller somehow, not in stature but in presence, as if she finally understood that she wasn't in control anymore. Her fingers twisted together nervously, and for the first time in what felt like years, she seemed unsure. It felt surreal. This was the same woman who once brushed me off with a simple hand gesture. Now she sat there, struggling to find the right words. She shifted slightly on the couch and drew in a slow breath. I didn't think you'd actually leave." I let out a quiet, mirthless laugh. "I know. That was always the problem, wasn't it?" She never believed I could be anything other than the version of me who stayed loyal, forgiving, endlessly patient. For years, she kept testing the limits, seeing how much I'd take before I finally snapped. Honestly, I should have left a long time ago. Maybe then she would have recognized the gravity of what she was about to lose before it slipped away. But I had been too wrapped up in hope, too sure that if I just waited long enough, she'd come back. She bit her lip and lowered her gaze to her hands. "I didn't mean it like it sounded." I raised my eyebrows. "You didn't mean to say I didn't deserve your affection?" She paused. I needed space. Everything started to feel too heavy. I shook my head, letting out a breath. "No. What you really needed was control." Her eyes snapped up to mine in surprise. "That's not fair," she began. I took a step closer, cutting her off. "That's exactly what it had been all along. You wanted control, the ability to decide when I mattered, when I was worthy of your time. You kept the upper hand in the relationship, fully aware that no matter how distant you became, I'd remain right there, hoping that someday you'd finally return my love." She swallowed hard, but she didn't deny any of it. Running a hand through my hair, a wave of exhaustion hit me. But I couldn't keep living that way anymore. Her jaw clenched. "So that's it? You just walk away? Just like that?" That was the part she couldn't comprehend, the fact that I could leave before she said it was over. In her world, she held the reins. She believed she dictated how this would end. But this time she wasn't calling the shots. And that terrified her. I crossed my arms, watching her closely. "What do you want from me, Camilla?" She flinched when I said her name, maybe because I didn't say it the way I used to. There was no affection, no pleading hidden in my voice. No longing. Just the calm certainty of someone who had finally seen the truth. She looked at me, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I don't know," she whispered. That was the real heart of it, wasn't it? She didn't want me gone, but she couldn't bring herself to fully love me either. What she wanted was the comfort of knowing I was still there, that I'd keep lingering in the background, holding on to something she had stopped appreciating long ago. I let out a long breath, rubbing my jaw. "Well, I do." Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment I thought she might break down. But she didn't. She just sat silently, watching as I headed for the door. Her voice followed me, small and trembling. "Where are you going?" I paused, glanced over my shoulder. "To a place where I don't have to beg to be wanted." Then I walked away. For the first time in years, I didn't glance back. I didn't stop until I was inside my car. As soon as I shut the door, I grabbed the steering wheel and exhaled slowly. That crushing weight, the one that had lived on my chest for years, was finally gone. Not because she had given me peace, but because I had created it for myself. For far too long, I'd let my happiness hinge on someone who never truly cherished it. I'd clung to a version of her that only existed in my memories, waiting and hoping she'd one day become that woman again. But love isn't meant to feel like endurance. It shouldn't resemble a slow unraveling. Now, for the first time, I felt unchained. As I drove through the city toward Owen's place, the bright lights passed me by like faded streaks, and for once, my mind wasn't spinning with regrets or what-ifs. I wasn't dissecting every moment, wondering what I could have done differently or hoping she'd come to her senses. That wasn't mine to carry anymore. When I stepped into Owen's apartment, he was already there, waiting with 2 beers in hand. He studied me for a second, then smirked. "So, how's it feel?" I dropped onto the couch, took the bottle from him. Like I've been holding my breath for years and finally let it out. He nodded, clearly satisfied. "Told you it'd be like that." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. "You did. I just wasn't ready to hear it." And that was the truth. I had convinced myself that staying meant fighting for something real. That if I just held on long enough, things would change. But love isn't a prize to be earned. If someone truly cares, you don't have to beg them to show it. That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. No restless tossing. No silent pleading for a message that would never come. No worrying whether she was with someone else. Just stillness. Just calm. The next morning, I woke early, grabbed a coffee, and stepped outside to watch the sunrise. And for once, my thoughts weren't wrapped around her. Not around what she was doing, who she was with, or whether she was having regrets. My thoughts were on me, on what I wanted next, on what the future might look like without the chains of the past dragging me back. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through old texts, old pictures, old moments. One by one, I deleted them. Not because I was angry, not because I hated her, but because I didn't need those pieces anymore. I wasn't that man who waited in the shadows, hoping for affection. I wasn't the man who pleaded for love. I had become someone different, someone stronger, and for the first time in ages, I felt genuinely excited to see what came next. Because I wasn't lost anymore. I was finally free.